and maybe a little bit of community as well. Thank you very much, everyone online and in person, for being patient with us with the delay. We've got it all sorted. It's the first time we've done a live stream, and so, you know, we always knew that this might happen, but, you know, we're glad that we've got it up and running, and we hope everyone's ready, fulfilled, and ready for some speeches. And first off, we'll kick off with Mia Borthwick, actor, theatre maker, and musician.
Oh, is it on? Hello, everybody. It's really lovely to be here. I've come all the way from Weston-super-Mare in Somerset, so I'm not actually from London, so it's amazing to come here. I am basically going to tell you a story. So my name is Mia, and I have dyscalculia. If you were to tell me 10 years ago that I would be stood here today openly sharing to a room full of people that I have dyscalculia, well, I probably would have said something like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I was diagnosed with dyscalculia roughly 17 years ago. And I'm sure, there we go. I was diagnosed with dyscalculia roughly 17 years ago. And it's only in this past year that I have finally began to accept it as part of myself. Why did I feel so ashamed of this condition? Well, here's my story. So every parents' evening, every parents' evening at school, it consisted of my teachers saying the same things. Mia is very quiet. Mia never puts her hand up to answer questions. I can't tell if Mia understands what's going on in any of my lessons. This became a big concern, but it ended up just being put down to the fact that I was just a shy kid. But my mum always knew it was something more. When I was 6 years old, one of my teachers pulled my mum in after school for a chat. I've noticed that Mia is really struggling with maths. She is really behind the rest of the class, and I believe she may have something called dyscalculia. What is dyscalculia? Asked my mum. Dyscalculia is a specific learning difficulty to do with maths, the teacher explained. It's very uncommon and not something we've come across much in the school. Unfortunately, we can't get her tested until she's older. So that evening, my mum did all of the research she could on dyscalculia, although the information online was very limited, but she pieced together what she could and returned to school the next day with a better understanding. I think I understand why Mia can be so quiet in lessons, explained my mum. Dyscalculia is also about sequencing. People with dyscalculia often struggle with tasks like counting, telling the time, and even forming sentences. I've noticed that sometimes Mia needs extra time to process her thoughts before she speaks. It's likely because she finds it harder to organize ideas in a sequence. Now, by this point, I think my mum was probably the number one expert on dyscalculia, but she was just determined to get me the support that I needed. I will do everything I can to make sure Mia gets the help she needs with maths, my teacher assured us. So together we explored different ways of learning maths, like kinesthetic learning. I was given counters to help me learn how to count, and she even got me to walk around the classroom and count my steps. These were all things that helped me sort of make sense of numbers. My mum was just so relieved that we had so much support. Unfortunately, that support did not last long, because when I moved up to the next class, my new teacher was not so understanding. My mum explained again that I needed support in maths classes and would feel more comfortable using counters to help me. Sure, no problem, we will help her, the teacher replied. Until one day, we were given a surprise maths test. The desks were arranged individually and I was seated at the front. I was told that I would not be allowed to use my counters or any form of support, as this was not allowed and it would not be very fair to the other students. It was one of the first times I truly felt panic take over. And this would not be the last time I experienced this feeling. When I started secondary school, I was officially diagnosed with dyscalculia. I was 10 years old and everything just started to make sense, and it was just nice to finally have it confirmed. Surely this would mean I would get extra help in maths, right? Sure, no problem, we will help her, the school assured. However, bizarrely, I was put in the highest set for maths. Why is Mia in this class? Asked my mum. She has dyscalculia. There's just no way she can keep up with the other students. Well, Mia has a very strong ability in English, the teacher responded. Yeah, but her strengths in English does not match her struggles in maths, my mum insisted. Well, she can just use a calculator, the teacher shrugged, who ironically was the head of maths. My mum fought hard to have me moved to a lower set in maths where I might receive the right kind of support. Eventually they agreed, but then this also meant that they placed me in the lower set for English, despite my strengths. And I remember coming home from school that day and I wrote my mum a letter and it read, "Dear Mum, I'm really sorry that I'm not doing very well at school. I promise I will work harder." And that completely broke her heart. The same treatment carried on when I took my SATs exams. Mia will struggle so much, and I refused to let her take her maths exam, my mum pleaded once again. She has no choice, the head teacher said. And at GCSEs, Mia will struggle with her GCSE maths exam. I refuse to let her take it. She has no choice. Well, can't she have extra time? Can she be in a separate room to everybody else? No, she can't. All I ever needed was help. I never made a fuss. I quietly got on with the lessons, even though I was really struggling. I didn't talk back. I just kept my head down. And in subjects like English, drama, and music, I excelled. My confidence shined through, and I fully engaged in those lessons. So why was I not getting the help that I desperately needed with maths? The answer, I think, is because I didn't look or act like someone who is neurodivergent. Because society has this narrow image of what a learning difficulty is supposed to look like, and I didn't fit into this box. Nobody could understand how I could be so strong in English yet struggle with maths. To many people, I was just lazy or worse, faking it. I mean, after all, I was supposedly the only student in the school with this condition. And sadly, I've grown up with this image of myself that I was just not very clever, that I was stupid, and I would never be able to achieve anything. I hated dyscalculia and how it affected my life. And I'm not the first, and sadly, I'm not the last to feel this way. But it's not too late to unravel this belief. So to anyone out there with dyscalculia, I want you to know that you are clever, you're not stupid, and your condition is very real. Most importantly, you are not alone. I may not have a maths GCSE, but I did get a first-class honours degree in performing arts. You can achieve anything you set your mind to. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And my message to educators is this: remember that every brain is wired uniquely. Many individuals with dyscalculia are highly creative and intelligent, and all we need is extra support with maths. Take the time to listen, understand, and appreciate how different minds work, and adapt your teaching to support each individual. Remember, your communication is only as good as the response you receive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mia. It's always interesting to sort of hear more about people's experiences at schools. I think a lot of us here may have had that experience at school whereby we grew up at a time where neurodivergency, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dyslexia wasn't really I'm in the face of someone. Sorry about that. Yes, I'm in the right position now. Sorry. Problem with being dyspraxic is you often find yourself in the wrong physical place. It's interesting to hear Bill's reflections on what it was like at school, because I think a lot of us grew up at a time where it wasn't really understood. I mean, in my case, they tried to solve it with Skittles, for crying out loud. But moving on to the next speaker, Jamie Johnston, consumer technology entrepreneur and founder of Mattr.
Firstly, my name is Jamie Johnston. As mentioned in the leaflet you've got there, I am the founder of Mattr. Mattr is a dating app for the different. So the story of why I founded Mattr roughly around 3 years ago was during the pandemic. I went from being quite a successful sales director in a very fast-moving startup to being in furlough and locked in my house, as many people in here would have been. And that lack of routine and lack of stimulation really caused me to have quite severe poor mental health. It's when I saw a psychiatrist at this point that I was diagnosed with ADHD, which I'm sure a lot of people in this room will know about, which is great because most people don't, which is a hybrid between ADHD and autism, which is weird because they're quite different things. And I wanted to articulate this moving forward when I was doing online dating, and I felt like I couldn't. I felt like people would judge me. I felt like people would get rejected. I would get rejected by others. And I just did what a lot of people in this room probably do a lot, which is masking. So I pretended to be someone I wasn't for a long time, and I would go on dates and meet people, and they would fizzle out because my symptoms or whatever would be suppressed, and then they would come up and they would break it off. So I thought, why don't I create a company where everyone can be open and honest about who they are, whether they're neurodivergent, whether they suffer with poor mental health, whether they have depression, anxiety, whether they might just be a little bit quirky and don't feel like they fit in, and they're empowered to do so, and it's cool, right? I didn't want an app that where you had to come on to have a diagnosis, okay? I didn't want us to feel we are defined by a diagnosis, because a lot of us in this room will have been at school and removed from classes, put in different rooms and felt ostracized from our peers. So I really wanted this to be about being different and being cool, which is what we all are, by the way. So Mattr launched 2 years ago, and we launched as a brand 2 years ago, and near enough exactly this time last year, we launched the product, and it's been most stressful time of my life, aged me many, many years, but we're doing such fantastic work. In fact, I've got the exact figures if I can remember off the top of my head. We facilitated 36,207 conversations in only in London in 1 year. 16,000 people have downloaded our product, which is just mind-blowing for me, because it was just an idea I had in the gym thinking, why can't we just do this differently? And I quit my job and went and did it, which is very, very nerve-wracking and scary, but very rewarding. My partner sitting at the back of this room, she can probably attest to how stressed I get, but also how happy I get when things go well. And what we really wanted to do is do everything different, right? Oh, there are slides. Wonderful. Oh, you can skip forward quite a bit now. If we just go to yep. Oh, actually, that slide's a good one. The second one more forward, please. Great. Yeah, actually, this slide's a really good one. I would have said this if I'd remembered it. So why now? Why are we doing this now? So on the left-hand side, you can see, and this is, a couple of years old now, but 42% of young people now either suffer with neurodivergence and poor mental health, as per Harmony Health, which is a massive data company for the health industry. And then this is the one that absolutely blows my mind. Next year, the UK is going to lose £479 billion in sales due to inaccessibility of products. Okay, so what you have here is a perfect storm of people needing accessible products and no one making them or selling them to people. So we keep talking about where we're going to get our tax revenues from and all this stuff in the government. Make accessible products, literally right there, 479 billion as per PwC, which is one of the biggest consulting firms in the world. Next slide, please. Cool. These are some stats. I'm not going to go into all of them, as you probably know, but why did we choose dating? I kind of told you my own personal story, but you can see here on the board how important it is to people, okay? 1 in 3, near enough people with ADHD feel like ADHD is the reason that their relationships failed. 75% of people who suffer with mood disorders feel like they can't articulate that to other people because of what? Fear of judgment, and even worse, past bad experiences. People bullying them, people pushing them down. Next slide, please. Cool. As I mentioned, this is all the stuff that we've done in 1 year, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And one thing I will say before we kind of get to the end of this is what we did with the product is we wanted to make it the whole way through as stress-free and as beneficial to you as possible. So not only do we help you match you with the best people, but we also have brand partnerships with around 50, is it saying there? Yeah. I need to even have a look. Oh, 64. Yeah, 64 brands we work with, from bars, restaurants, mental health support, neurodivergent, and mental health products, including earbuds, what they called earplugs, and supplements, etc. So not only are we helping you with the dating, but we're actually helping you get on the dates and make the dates more enjoyable too. So it's not just matching; it's actually brands too. Next slide, please. Cool. Yeah, so I want everyone to invest in change, right? Let's all try and do a bit of difference to make a change, right? So there are other options out there for people. And I was recently on a podcast called ADHD Chatter, which I'm sure some people in this room listen to, where he asked me about neurodivergence and kind of how I felt about it. Just remember, it's never been better than it is today to be neurodivergent, ever. In the history of the world, there's more resource, there's more people doing what we do, there's more awareness of what we're doing, and it will only ever get better. So tomorrow will be the best day ever to be a neurodivergent. So if you ever feel like you're struggling, just know it's always been better today than it was yesterday, and it's always going to be better tomorrow. Thank you guys for listening.
Next up, we have Suzy Rowland, founder of the Happy in School project and author of Send in the Clowns.
Good evening, everybody. It's really nice to be here, and thank you for asking me. I'm going to start my short presentation. No pictures, but lots of words. with a poem. And the poem is one from my own collection called Songs of My Soul. That I wrote in about 2013, not long after my son's diagnosis, which was a bit of a catalyst for my whole life. Having worked in the corporate sector, I left that, having to go to work every day for a different sort of life, and to do what I do today, which is advocacy and training and speaking around neurodiversity. So, but just a reflection on some of the thoughts going through my head as an undiagnosed ADHD employee. It's called The Commute. The stench of frustration hangs in the air, the look of exhaustion abundantly clear, the taste of coffee on people's lips, the buttery croissants clinging to hips, the touch of a stranger's bag or case, the jolt of an armpit right in your face, the crinkle of newspapers rustling around, the clicking of keyboards oppressively loud, the nasal announcements drone overhead, the task of the day polluting your head, the stress of the day is clenching your jaw, the pressurized headache makes your tired eyes sore. The scramble to find something healthy to eat, the urge to drink vodka, shots chaste or neat, the need to do anything to keep you from screaming, the realization you're awake and not dreaming. The shock that you're 41, no, 42, the life you envisaged escaping from view, the need to do something real with your life, the desire to do something that means you're alive. The dreams and the ambitions you had as a child, the confidence possessed now seems quite wild. The vision and focus you manage for others, the goals for yourself are what really matters. The time is right now, as we don't live forever. The saying goes, it's neither now or not ever. The need is so real to break out of the rut. The station is approaching. I've reached my stop. Thank you. So clearly some of the descriptions around that commute and the sensory overload before I even knew what that was, it was quite difficult getting to work every day and not fitting in and not understanding the rules of the corporate workplace. So that was the reflection that came out. So the first non-fiction book I wrote is called S.E.N.D in the Cloud, which is obviously made famous by the Julie Christie song and stage show. And this is what I call a handbook of survival for parents at the very beginning of that journey around their child's ADHD and autism diagnosis. I just focus in on those two because that was my experience. So again, I completely hyper-focused on and read everything I could find. This is written before I was diagnosed myself. And it felt like a gift to other parents to give them all the information that was available at the time. This came out in 2020, to be a bit of a roadmap in terms of advocating and knowing, what an LSA meant and what a EHCP or a statement meant and what the TA would do in comparison to the LSA, and just going through that whole new lexicon. So I want to read a passage that relates to young children, young people, and how the education system treats them. Children and young people who are repeatedly excluded from school and later diagnosed with special educational needs can suffer damaging psychological effects for months or even years afterwards. Persistent disruptive children who are not diagnosed with specific learning needs usually go the route of alternative provision, AP, such as a pupil referral unit or permanent exclusion. Whatever conclusions you draw from the exclusion figures, there is something strangely skewed in an education system that considers large numbers of our future generation to be, quote, unteachable. Perhaps there still isn't enough information about what autism and ADHD behaviours look like in the classroom, although I very much doubt it. I feel we are used to discarding children whose behaviours we don't fully understand or have resources to figure out, which is terribly sad. The resolutions lie in a mix of strategies, including teacher and parent discussions about what is achievable within the current structures. The pinnacle of educational achievement isn't going to be higher education degree for some. Creativity, kindness, and vocational skills can all be achieved without a traditional degree model, and they are valuable to any forward-thinking employer. Diversity in all its formats is good for business. Schools and employers are starting to work more closely with mental health, autism, ADHD campaigners to open up career paths and prospects for neurodivergent candidates. This is much needed, as the employment rates for disabled people are still lower than they should be, and at the time of writing, 53.2% in comparison to 81% of non-disabled people. That was 2019 figures. Please note that this figure included all disabled people, not only those with neurodiversity. We need a clutch of fresh policy ideas and collaborations. The structural barriers to equality echo the barriers that Black people and other minorities face. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Suzy. Next up, we have Sanjay Kumarendran, autism researcher and advocate.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much. It's honestly amazing to be here. I just want to thank a few people before I get going. So first of all, I want to thank Leon for inviting me. I just really appreciate that. And I also want to thank my friend Natasha, who's here in the audience tonight. It just means so much that she's here to support me. And we've been friends for 7 years, and I don't know what I would do without her support. So thank you so much. All right. With that being said, I'll just jump right into it. And I suppose, you know, in the interests of honesty and transparency, because I feel like that's very much been the theme tonight, I have a confession to make, which is just that before I gave the speech, like as recently as I think a few days ago, I was kind of debating with myself about whether or not to even disclose the fact that I have an autism diagnosis when I chose to speak about my research. That I know that just seems so absurd because everyone else here has been so transparent and honest about their experiences. But just like Jamie mentioned, you know, there's that fear of diagnosis, right? There's that fear of like, what will people think of you? And that hangs over you. And you think about like, am I going to be defined by a label? And that's something that, you know, is a real fear. But I've just felt so inspired by what everyone else has been saying tonight and the honesty and transparency. And, you know, much like you said, Mia, like, you know, if somebody had asked me a long time ago, would you ever be up on a stage saying you have autism? That's something that I would have found really hard as well. So I want to say that, you know, when other people like feel courageous enough to speak up, it makes other people feel that as well. So I just wanted to start off by saying that. And in the spirit of honesty, I guess I'd start off by speaking about some of my childhood experience, which led me to the point where I am now. So I was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2, as I had been non-verbal, and I was showing a number of other quite severe symptoms, including like a lack of reciprocity when interacting with others. And I just, you know, wasn't hitting those typical developmental milestones that you would expect for a child of my age. So my mum went to a clinician and I received an autism diagnosis. Now, the immediate thing that my mum noticed when this happened was that you know, she was quite frustrated because she felt as though the response she was getting from other clinicians and from like doctors and social workers was this message which was used as an excuse for inaction, which was just accept him as he is. And while, you know, in a vacuum, that's like a great message, you know, we should all be accepting of each other. The problem was that, you know, this message of acceptance was being used as like essentially a synonym for like do nothing. And that was something that my mum just refused to accept. And I have everything to thank to her for that refusal to accept that. Because what my mum did was that where she wasn't getting the help she needed from the social services, from clinicians, she took upon herself. She went and used the internet, which was, you know, not as accessible or like easy to use back in those days, you know, and she went and searched through the research literature, and she actually recruited a team of psychologists with whom she worked to deliver an extensive program of therapies and interventions from when I was the age of 2 to the age of 6, which proved to be immeasurably helpful. This involved social skills training to improve my kind of like reciprocity with other people, my ability to interact with other kids and with adults around me as well. And by the time I was 6 years old, the psychologists who my mum had recruited said that their work was essentially done and that they fully believed that I would be able to go on to live a fulfilling and independent life as an adult. And thankfully, I can say that that's the case. And I owe it all to the amazing work that they put in. I really do. And now I'm still at the beginning of my journey, but I really hope to take up the mantle that my mum and those psychologists that she worked with, you know, the work that they pursued. So that's brought me to this point now, where I have dedicated my life so far. Since I was 17, it's been my goal to pursue autism research. And in the short amount of time that I've spent working within this area, I felt very inspired and I felt very motivated, but I've also felt very frustrated because while things are certainly getting better, and as Jamie noted, it's like arguably the best time alive to be a neurodivergent people, you know, our work is far from done and we've got a lot left to do. And I think that, like, you know, one of the strongest or like most focal points for improvement is that we really need a stronger evidence base for therapies and interventions, and we need to be able to make diagnoses at an earlier age, because if you're able to get in early and make those changes early for children, you can really help them to develop those social skills in a natural way so that they don't end up having to mask in a way later in adult life that it feels harmful and cognitively draining for them. And one thing that really needs to change before we can make that possible is that we need to bridge the gap between research and practice. This is a long and difficult task, and I don't even have all the answers as to how we can do that, but I do know where we can start. I think researchers need to have a clear line of communication with educational psychologists, with clinicians, and with schools, and there needs to be up-to-date research evidence available for all practitioners who need it. And I think that that research evidence needs to be communicated to the public in a clear way so that any misconceptions or stereotypes or generalizations about autistic people can be cleared up, and we can know what kind of supports they need to develop in environments that will help them flourish. Now, moving forward into the present day as well, we can see that, you know, autism and neurodiversity is just very much part of the cultural zeitgeist, and it's being discussed now more than ever. And while that comes with like a lot of amazing benefits, and the fact that, you know, as I noted earlier, people now feel more comfortable to speak about their experiences, which is a wonderful and beautiful thing, at the same time, there's a lot of controversy, and, you know, not all awareness is good awareness. And I think on that note, I kind of just wanted to highlight the way in which I feel that autism is being used as a cudgel in various culture wars. And I want to kind of just like push back on that. Because as a researcher, I feel that it's my responsibility to use my platform in a way which is not just like, you know, accurate and, you know, informed by strong evidence, but also confirms, you know, my solidarity with marginalized communities. And with that in mind, I kind of want to speak about, like, you know, the way autism is being used as a cudgel in this kind of issue of, like, you know, transgender identities. And what I mean by that is, you know, it's a common talking point among transphobes that, you know, many people who are trans are autistic, and while it is true that there is actually a higher rate of gender dysphoria among the autistic population and vice versa, I want to be clear that, like, having autism in no way invalidates one's experience of being trans. It's not a case of, like, simply being confused. I want to make it very clear that autistic people have just as much agency and ability to decide for themselves as anybody else does. Now, I think it is true that we need more research in this area. We don't yet have any longitudinal studies, so, studies collecting data points at multiple points in time across multiple years. What I really think we need is we do need studies that, like, look at the long-term outcomes of autistic people who choose to transition, simply because autistic people are different. So the path of clinical treatment for autistic people with gender dysphoria might look different, and it might mean that they have specific needs, but it's not an excuse to throw the baby out with the bathwater and decide that all autistic people are deluded and incapable of making decisions about their body and about their gender for themselves. I just wanted to emphasize that because I think that a commitment to strong empirical evidence is in no way an excuse to abandon the commitment to advancing the rights of marginalized communities, including the LGBT community. And that's something I feel quite strongly about, and I really want to drive the point home about. Autism is a neurodevelopmental condition. It's not a cudgel to be used in a culture war against marginalized people who honestly don't need any more hate than they're already getting. So I just wanted to kind of drive that point home. I'm sure, that's not something that needs to be said to anyone here in a targeted way, but it's just something I feel quite strongly about. And then as a final note, I kind of just wanted to speak about what I feel are some of the steps that really need to be taken from here. And again, I don't have all the answers, but I think speaking to my friends, speaking to my colleagues, a few clear, like, patterns emerge. And I think with something like autism and neurodiversity in general, it's quite naturally a contentious topic because the neurodiversity movement, by definition, seeks to encourage a view of autism, ADHD, and other developmental conditions as a natural part of human variation, not something to be pathologized. So understandably, when there are suggestions made of early therapies and early interventions, there is maybe an aversive response to that sometimes, an idea that this is maybe trying to change the essence of who these children are. And for me personally, speaking from my experience, nothing could be further from the truth. I feel that the help I've received as a child has made things feel much more natural for me, socially speaking, and I feel that I would otherwise have maybe had to mask in quite a maladaptive way as an adult, but because I got that change so early, these things feel quite natural to me now, and I'm very grateful for that. And I also wanted to note, though, that the one thing that I think people really are correct to note is that the idea of autism as a disability is at least partially socially constructed by society. So one thing I really want to emphasize is that the changes that I envision and that I think are necessary for autistic people living in the world today are twofold, and they're not a zero-sum game. They complement each other rather than taking away from each other. And these changes are changes to society and changes to the individual or their way of behaving or managing. So I think that we can and we should do both. So I think therapies and interventions like behavioral therapies that I received as a child are really important. And I'd like to see the support and resources become available so that these can be available to any autistic person from any background, regardless of their financial standing. They should just be available free because it's a human right. So that's one part of it. And then the other part I want to really emphasize is that, we can make all these changes to help an autistic person have, say, improved social skills and to be able to kind of engage in more reciprocal back and forth conversation with other people. But what does that mean if we're not changing the environments to make them more welcoming and to make them more accommodating for autistic people? So with that in mind, we really have to change the world. And that's an ambitious undertaking, but it's, nothing worth doing is easy. And that starts with a few things. We need neurodiversity-friendly architecture. We need public spaces that are not overwhelming on a sensory level for neurodivergent people. And we need to combat the harmful myths and disinformation surrounding autistic people. We can do all of these changes, and they're all possible, and I know because I can see the beginnings of it starting now. So on that note, I just want to close out by saying that I want to help in whatever small way I can to build a world in which autistic people can not only feel comfortable, can also flourish. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. And next up we have Leah, artist and musician.
Check. Yeah, it works. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Leah. You can call me Leah. I have some slides with lots of pictures because that's how I like to share my thoughts, because sometimes my words can be jumbly. And so while we wait for the slides, I can like share a little bit about myself. I am an artist and a musician from Indonesia. I came here last year. I just graduated from Royal College of Art, MFA Arts and Humanities, and in that master, I was like focusing on health and care electives, as well as artistic research electives. So what I want to share here. Oh wait, I was diagnosed with ADHD and autism a few years ago. So I'm a light diagnosed person, which opens a lot of like answers about the questions that I have about myself, and also with my art practices, which is focused on workshop facilitating, therapeutic art method, because I took psychology in my BA, and I'm kind of trying to find out how art can help general public or people like us, people like me, who are like having a hard time connecting with people with the waves that considered normal or considered like the general. Okay, so this is one of the painting that is combined with music and body movement. Next, please. I'm just gonna go through with the pictures. Behind me was a painting that was like also created with music. I was like trying to make a therapeutic art method for people to co-create paintings as the medium to communicate. So for neurodivergent people, sometimes words cannot be enough, or it can be like sometimes hard to like send a message through. But with art, it can help a lot, something that cannot be shared with words and something like that. So yeah, this next. Neurodiversity, transdisciplinary, art for well-being, art and stimming. I am also trying to like starting to think about how stimming for autistic people can also be put in a context of expression, creation, art, dance, movement, painting, singing, echolalia, and something like that, and things like that. And it is still a long journey, and I'm trying to collaborate with a lot of like other wonderful people in London to make things happen. Next, please. So this is what I do with music, performing beyond words. If you do music here, sometimes you can like understand how when you communicate with each other, when you're jamming or when you're improvising, for example, you don't need words, but something more than that, beyond words, is like happening there. And that's what I want to invite. I want people to be able to experience that. And sometimes the hardest block is that a lot of people think that they can't do art, they can't do music. And as a workshop facilitator, what I aim is actually to make it more accessible to everyone. Next, please. It's the same improvisation. Next, please. This one is like combining it with dance, still in the beginning of the research process, but I'm hoping to be able to invite the public and the participants to do it with me together. And then next, please. Feelings, may I try to paint your shapes? Colors, can I dance with you? And something like that. Next, please. This is one of the art practice that I did. This is inspired by the art practice in Indonesia, where we are doing repetitive dance movement with improvisation and singing. So we're communicating collectively, but in a creative way. I am thinking that it can be something that be used in neurodiversity community to like help us explore other ways of communicating. Lived experience. when I was like looking for artist studios in London, I was like trying to find places who are which is like silent and not noisy. And I remember one of the organizers says, wait, if that's what you're looking for, how do you survive London? And I was like, yeah, it's a good question, a good point. And I showed her my active noise canceling headphones, and I was like, yeah. So two of my answer to this is, the first one is communication. Next, please. I want to show, this is what I had in Royal College of Art. I have been fighting so hard to get this inclusion letter. It's actually doesn't really cost the organizer or the institution a lot of money to do this. As long as I can communicate to the lecturer, to the people around me, that I only need to use my headphones when they're teaching, and I still listen. And I will be late probably sometimes, although I have tried so much. And just the knowledge of me being understood by the lecturers or my friends, it already helps me a lot. And probably, hopefully, more organization and institutions can also help this happen. Next, please. And the second one is expression. This is two of my artworks. I think some of you can recognize that. I don't understand humans. I hope you don't mind. I don't do eye contact. Sometimes art can help me or other neurodivergent people to express their struggles. And I'm hoping to make this happen also in my workshops. Workshops on neurodiversity. I'm out of breath. How art foster dialogues and understanding. So in my workshop, I am trying, was done in Royal College of Art Neurodiversity Society. And the participants are not only neurodivergent, but also a combination between neurodivergent and neurotypical people, so that the conversation can happen between these two groups, if we can say that. These are the results of the workshop. What you saw before, the previous slide, was the STEM toy and the hat that I, as the facilitator, tried to provide to the participants so that it can be more comfortable and accessible for the neurodivergents who are having a hard time within the workshop setting. So it is something that I learned from University of Bath, where I met Leon, and then when I came there, they provide those, and I was like, oh my God, I feel so understood. Thank you so much for doing this. Just putting a bowl of STEM toys or just telling where the quiet rooms are is already very helpful for neurodivergent people. Art for Wellbeing, expressive painting, painting to music sessions. Yeah, this is one of the workshops. So if we can like see 2 or 3 next slides as well. I'm inviting people who are not from art background to paint, to create, to respond to music with some guidance, where a lot of people feeling like, I cannot draw, I cannot paint. But actually the painting, the artwork is is the medium that invites us to talk together, to share. It's like a trigger when we, not a trigger in a negative way, but it's like a, something that when you see it, oh my God, this reminds me of the struggle that I have about sensory issues. Oh, this reminds me of this. And then that conversation within that circle happens with art on the table. So that's what I'm trying to do. Next. This is also done in Indonesia, and I'm hoping that I can do more of these in here. Next, please. And I think that's it for me. I hope it can be bermanfaat. I forgot the beneficial. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, it's Peter Downey, an insurance administrator at Sutton Council.
Excellent, first class. So basically, warning. The speech that I'm about to give contains subject matter that some people here with us, whether physically or remotely, may find distressing or upsetting. So basically, I'm going to talk a bit about the COVID-19 pandemic and how it's affected me as a neurodivergent person. because recently the UK government actually did an inquiry into the COVID-19 pandemic and how it's affected everyone, and I shared my story. So here's how it goes. I've often said that 2020 was a good year until I got back to Britain from Ireland, because I went to Ireland New Year's Eve 2019, stayed there until the 9th of January. COVID-19 to me seems almost like a distant memory. I very clearly remember. I mean, the pandemic started when I was in my final year at King's College London. That's how I know Leon, by the way, because he went to King's College London as well. So I was there, and then I remember seeing these posters saying that if you've returned from Wuhan, you need to self-isolate and all that. And then obviously, I mean, Dad and I actually discussed us possibly going to Paris at some point when I was in Ireland, because my dad lives in Ireland, and we discussed going to Paris because I did a year there as an exchange student before COVID-19 started. But obviously, February, March outbreaks in Italy and Spain, that got called off for obvious reasons. I wasn't too bothered by that at the time, because I mean, I figured I could probably meet up with him, maybe go for a drink or something. But then of course, March 2020 was when I really started noticing changes. Should probably mention now, as you probably know, I'm definitely already autistic, but I'm also currently waiting to be assessed for ADHD. So, and because I mean, obviously, for many autistic people, they didn't necessarily see COVID-19 as a bad thing. I mean, and in my own sense, it was a good thing, because it meant that it wasn't. It was, in some places, it was quite a slow pace of life. And might I also add that my alcohol consumption actually decreased during the pandemic. So, but it was very hard for me in the sense of the changes. We'll get to that later. But I noticed some changes early March, because when I was at King's, I would actually go to chapel every Wednesday, and I noticed some changes in relation to the offering a sign of peace, and also with the distribution of communion and all that. And also, when I went to the gym, I noticed that they were providing hand sanitizer and all that. I'd heard a bit about COVID-19. Obviously, I remembered swine flu very well. That's actually one of my autistic traits. I've got a very good long-term memory. But I remembered swine flu very well. And because all the media was saying that in most cases, COVID-19 only caused mild illness, I thought, okay, this is another pandemic. Got to wash my hands and all that. And I actually stopped coughing and sneezing into my hands during the swine flu pandemic. So that's a good thing. So I didn't know that it was going to be on the level that it was, but then of course on the 16th, 17th of March, we had the advice to avoid all non-essential travel and contact with others. And as an autistic man, I must admit that it wasn't immediately clear to me where essential stopped and non-essential began. So the next day, 17th of March, I went and I travelled up to London as normal. And then I noticed that the classroom was empty. And I then did some checking, and I learned that all the lectures and everything had been suspended. Everything was moved online. Now, I don't know how many of you grew up with Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, but if any of you go onto YouTube and you type in Mario and Luigi Partners in Time soundtrack, Toad Town Ruins, then that will be some very fitting background music for London as I perceived it at the time. And then, of course, we had the 18th of March. I learned that I couldn't go to chapel anymore either. It was all very remote, which isn't quite the same thing when you think about it. But anyway, I then learned, with regards to what I mentioned about my dad earlier, he lives in Ireland, and the Irish government at that time advised against all non-essential international travel, and anyone arriving in Ireland from abroad, including Great Britain, but not Northern Ireland, was expected to self-isolate for 2 weeks afterwards. So I realised that this meant that I wasn't going to see Dad again for some time. And of course, but then 19th of March, I started to think, okay, I don't like this at all, but there's something I can do about this. I decided to look to see if there were any COVID-19 vaccine trials in London, and there was, and I decided I was going to put myself forward for that, because obviously I figured if I did participate in a COVID-19 vaccine trial, I would have saved a very large number of lives worldwide, including that of Selena Gomez, because Selena Gomez, she actually has lupus, received a kidney transplant 2017, so I figured COVID-19 would be very dangerous for her. But it's not just Selena Gomez, it's also the indigenous peoples of the Amazon rainforest, for instance, because I mean they've probably got less immunity to it anyway. I mean, many centuries ago, when the colonizers from the European countries came to the Americas, many of the indigenous peoples were actually wiped out in part due to the introduction of infectious diseases like smallpox and measles. I've had to point out to countless anti-vaxxers over the years that measles is a more serious disease than you think. But yeah, so I figured not being able to see Dad was temporary, something that would pass. But if I saved a very large number of lives worldwide, that would stay with me for the rest of my life. Distancing seriously, because obviously testing positive for COVID-19 would have precluded participation. And I actually found that I listened a lot to the music of Mark Petrie in the months between March and June, July, because Mark Petrie, by the way, is a composer who's known for his epic music, if you know what I mean. His music has made me feel as though the Union flag should be flying when it's played, even though he isn't British. He's from New Zealand, but because the flag of New Zealand incorporates the Union flag into its design, I suppose that's pretty close. Anyway, so I did actually, here you go, and I put myself forward and I attended the screening visit, and I did mention to the doctor I saw the reasons why I'd put myself forward, and so that went pretty well. Turns out the doctor I saw was practically obsessed with Selena Gomez when he was younger, but apparently he didn't know that she'd had a kidney transplant. So I later saw someone else who'd also put himself forward for the vaccine trial, and I talked to him, and we had a bit of a discussion, because earlier in the year I actually saw a video by Man. Don't know if any of you have heard of him, but one of his videos earlier in 2020 was a major inspiration for me to put myself forward for a vaccine trial, because he did a video where the message was, you can take your greatest struggle and you can turn it into your greatest success. So yeah, ultimately, it didn't go the way I intended. I never actually received the candidate vaccine. In fact, the candidate that Imperial were developing never actually got approved. After they approved all the other candidates, they decided just to use what they'd learned as research into future pandemics, and we're probably going to have quite a few of those in the future. But the leader of the study that I put myself forward for, Dr. Katrina Pollock, her name is, she actually phoned me afterwards and told me that just by putting myself forwards, I'd allowed the research to go ahead. And after that phone call, I must admit that actually brought me to actual tears of joy. And I concluded, obviously, that Selena Gomez would probably be extremely proud of me if she ever found out what I did. But yeah. Later in the year, I also volunteered for the Journey Maker program. After the lockdown, we had journey makers who would volunteer at various train stations. I volunteered at Wimbledon first, then Herne Hill, pretty close to here, and then finally Woolwich Arsenal. The scheme ran from September, that's when I started, until it ended in November. And I actually got a certificate afterwards thanking me for helping to reduce the spread of COVID-19. So I mean, in recent years, obviously last year, Derek Draper died from complications of long COVID. And I found myself looking back, and I thought to myself, I did everything I possibly could. So why am I telling you about this? Well, I'm telling you about this because obviously there's a strong chance that we're going to have more pandemics in the future. Possibly just a flu pandemic, possibly another coronavirus of some description, but whatever happens, I think I've got some ideas as to how I'm going to get through it, and hopefully maybe some of you might have some idea as to how you might go through it. So I guess that's what I have to say.
Thank you very much, Peter. It is kind of weird to think it's going to be 5 years next year since COVID, isn't it? It almost feels like it was last year rather than 4 and a bit years ago. Anyway, on a slightly brighter note, videos, specifically from Alina Carroll, who is a YouTuber and a content creator who works in New Zealand and Canada, and Gabriela Verdugo, who's president of the S.E.N.D Foundation in Chile. I think we're just about to get those videos up very, very shortly. But before then, chat amongst yourselves.
Hello to everyone at the An Alternative Perspective event. My name is Alina Carroll. I am 28 years old, originally from New Zealand, but have just moved to the Toronto area. So I was 25 years old when I was diagnosed with autism, and it was a long time coming for me. I started therapy at 6 years of age, and this was because my mum could always tell that there was something pretty different about me. I saw therapists from the age of 6 up until the age of 25, and this was because I was given different diagnoses of anxiety, OCD, depression, the list just carried on. But for me, these diagnoses didn't kind of encapsulate what I felt, so my mental health just kind of deteriorated over time as I got older. I was really searching for answers basically to save my life, and ended up seeing a therapist for depression. And after 3 years of seeing her, she kind of got to know me very, very well, and then suggested autism, and she put me in front of a psychiatrist, and the diagnosis came from there. So I decided to make the big transition, the biggest transition of my life, to Canada about 2.5 months ago now, and I was very lucky because I have my best friend is over here, and so for me, having the stability of someone that I know, someone that I trust, has made the move all the more easier. But it has been incredibly difficult in terms of employment, navigating a world that I don't know, navigating an accent that I don't know, just all these unknowns and uncertainties that I'm having to get used to, basically. It was something that I never thought I would do. Travel particularly was something that I was never interested in, but something that I am kind of documenting in the process to try and, I guess, inspire other autistic people that they can travel and they can live abroad if they want to. So as I said, I have been documenting the process of the move. I document a lot of my life experiences on Instagram and on YouTube. I think the biggest reason as to why I started doing this was just to make people feel less alone, because I think when you grow up being undiagnosed autistic for 25 years, you go a hell of a long time kind of feeling like this alien and as though this world was not meant for you. And I think for me to receive comments from people who completely relate to me is the most worthwhile thing. It is my purpose. It is what I was put here on earth to do. It is what makes all the struggles of my life worth it. And ultimately, this is where I want my career to go. I'm very much building platforms online. I'm also writing a book about the process of being a late diagnosed autistic female and navigating a world. I would love to be a speaker, an advocate for women, for autistic women. And so that's kind of the direction that I'm heading. And I think that Toronto has a lot in store for me. So thank you so much for listening to me, and have a great day. Bye.
As a reminder, next up will be Gabriela Verdugo, president of the S.E.N.D Foundation from Chile.
Hola, soy Gabriela Verdugo, presidenta de la Fundación Unión Autismo y Neurodiversidad S.E.N.D. Somos una fundación de Chile integrada por 10 profesionales, personas autistas, personas cuidadoras, del mundo de la salud, de la educación, de la academia, del activismo y de la defensa de los derechos de la comunidad, de la población autista. Nos complace entregar este video para compartirlo con ustedes allá en Londres. Les contamos que la Fundación S.E.N.D trabajamos en pos de construir una cultura de conocimiento y de valoración del autismo, de la neurodiversidad y de la neurodivergencia. Nos interesa mucho también el ejercicio pleno de ciudadanía de las personas autistas, proteger a cabalidad y garantizar a cabalidad todos sus derechos sin exclusiones y propiciar su participación y contribución en el espacio cívico. Esos son los ejes que nos mueven en la Fundación S.E.N.D. Buscamos también ser una plataforma que democratice el acceso liberado a información basada en la evidencia y en la ética, que es lo que pueden encontrar en nuestro portal, en nuestra página web, www.fuan.cl. Además realizamos capacitaciones, a la fecha hemos capacitado a más de 20.000 personas, con contenidos, ¿cierto?, basados en la evidencia científica, que permitan educarnos sobre autismo y que, por cierto, aporten en la construcción de una cultura respetuosa sobre autismo y neurodivergencia. También nos interesa mucho ser un espacio que propicie la visibilización de la voz autista en primera persona. Así que la gran mayoría de nuestras actividades están validadas y si no, están siendo protagonizadas por personas autistas. Y también realizamos investigación y recientemente lanzamos un libro que busca fortalecer el diagnóstico temprano del autismo. Y tenemos cursos en línea y gratuitos y certificados a disposición también en nuestra página web. Así es que les enviamos un abrazo. Sabemos que hay muchas personas en distintas partes del mundo que también están trabajando fuertemente en la protección y defensa de los derechos humanos de las personas autistas y nos parece muy, muy importante. Es un reto global como humanidad que tenemos porque reconocer nuestras diferencias, validarlas, y nos permite también fortalecer la democracia, fortalecer nuestra convivencia democrática. Así es que somos unas convencidas de que la diferencia en condiciones de igualdad fortalece la democracia y que tenemos la oportunidad de enriquecernos como sociedad a partir de nuestras valiosas diferencias. Así es que les enviamos un gran saludo en esta gran jornada que están realizando.
Let there be light. My apologies, a brief moment where we do need to address the live audience. If you are watching online on the live camera feed, thank you very much for coming along. We hope you had a wonderful evening and we'll see you soon. For everyone else who's still in the room, we're going to get the video up in a second, so please stick around.